Hey everybody, happy Sunday. Thank you so much for joining me today on Etcetera on the Vibe Live. I'm your host, Kelly Barrett. Right off the bat, we want to wish a huge happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there watching. Happy moms to you guys. And man, I have been excited for this show for weeks, and I know the viewers have too. So I'm just going to go ahead and welcome my guest today, multi-instrumentalist, singer, songwriter, producer, the insanely talented Todd Kerns. Todd, hello.
Dancer, choreographer, you forgot all of
it. And I hear there's some comedy stuff coming up, but we'll get to that in a little bit too.
yeah, of course.
Adding comedian to the roster.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that, but sure. Yeah.
Todd, we were just talking before the show. It's so cool to meet you. You are a fellow Saskatchewan guy.
That's correct.
So to see one of my fellow Saskatchewan people, kicking ass and taking names it just makes my heart happy. And where are you living now?
I live in Vegas, actually. I've been down here 15 years, if you can believe it.
Wow.
Yeah, it's been when I really do the math on when I look back on my life, I was born in Estevan, Saskatchewan. We immediately moved up to northern Manitoba for about 13 years or 12 or 13 years. I don't really remember. And then we moved back to Saskatchewan, Lanigan, Saskatchewan, where I graduated from high school.
Right.
Then I was in Regina, then Calgary, then Vancouver, then the U.S. So it's been quite a migration, really. I think the trick was to keep going west and then go south, basically to get away from the cold if possible. We get back to Saskatchewan now, and I'm always quite taken aback when it's wintertime. I'm like, wow, we grew up in this. This is like the next level. Yeah.
How did we survive? How did we survive?
I don't know. I think we were made of stronger stuff back then, because people. I'll be like here, and I'll say, "Why is it so cold in the in the whatever air conditioned thing?" And I go, "Oh, you're from Canada, dude. You should be." I'm like, "Well, I don't actively seek out cold weather or like have some sort of natural sort of like ability to be impervious to it." I'm like, "No, I'm cold," and I remember being cold back then too.
Walking to school and that stuff, uphill 2 miles with bad shoes.
Exactly, backwards. On my hands and knees.
Right on. And we liked it.
We were thankful for it.
We were. First of all, Todd, I think we all want to know. I want to know, where does the Dammit come from? Where does Todd Dammit Kerns come from?
Well, Todd Dammit rhymes with God damn it. So that was always the joke when I was young. And then, it was always something we joked about. And then when I came to Vegas, it was really interesting for me to come to the U.S. because when I sort of initially, it's hard to say that I relocated because I never really intended to. I came down and a couple of opportunities presented themselves, and I was kind of like, okay, well, I'll get a visa and go through that whole process. And, and all of that sort of, you just never know if that's going to, and I just kind of figured like, well, if it doesn't work out, I go back, I go home. Right. And I had a million things on my plate back home anyway. But it worked out, and I would play gigs with my band. I put a band together called the Sin City Sinners here in Vegas with Brent Muscat from Faster Pussycat. And I would just always sign off as Todd Dammit because I thought, because the most interesting thing about it, and the most humbling thing about it was when you come and relocate somewhere, no one knows what my past was. You know what I mean? Right. Like it just didn't apply to the US because of just the Canadian music industry really was sort of invisible down here. So guys like Vinnie Paul from Pantera was a good friend of ours, and he would scream Todd Dammit across casinos, and I'd be like, "Oh, Vinnie's here." He didn't know who Todd Kerns was. He thought I was just Todd Dammit. So he just loved that. So that really kind of is where it got kind of stuck. And then a friend of mine made me a T-shirt. Well, Slash started calling me Todd Dammit Kerns. He would introduce me on the and I don't know. Are we allowed to curse on here? I don't know.
Well, yeah, it's like, pretend you're on the BBC, Todd. Just
exactly, because whenever it's Slash, there's going to be some cursing. But he would always introduce me as Todd Dammit motherfucking Kerns or Todd motherfucking Dammit Kerns. I can't remember how he said it, but it was always kind of like, wow, okay. But it just became. And then a friend of mine made a Dammit T-shirt for my birthday or Christmas or something like that. It just said Dammit on it, and I wore it on a DVD that we shot in England at Stoke-on-Trent, where Slash was kind of born and spent his earlier years just outside of London. Or I guess it's a little bit up north. I'm not quite sure exactly, but Lemmy's also born there, believe it or not. So it's a very interesting place to be. But anyway, I wore this shirt, and then it became kind of like, hey, how do I get one of those shirts? I go, this is the shirt. This is the only shirt. And then we just started making shirts, and then now it's kind of a whole other thing. So yeah, it really kind of took on a life of its own. I honestly never really intended for it to be anything other than just kind of a gag. It's still a gag, but it's a gag that has
It's
taken
a
on
thing.
life.
It's a thing.
It's a thing. It has become a thing, 100%.
So Todd, you've got a lot of like super cool projects on the go, and we're going to talk about those. But I kind of just want to get back to the beginning a bit. So, was it always going to be music for you, Todd? Did you always know that?
Oh yeah, yeah. I think I always knew that. I think initially it was just an obsession with music. Just an obsession with the bands, an obsession with all that stuff, and because I couldn't play anything, I used to just. My dad had a guitar, an acoustic guitar, and I used to just walk around the house pretending to be, rock and roll guy as a child, and he was just kind of like, no, sit down. This is a C, this is a G, he just showed me a couple of chords, and then that sort of became, the initial sort of gateway drug, really. And then after that, you just find yourself, then 2 or 3 friends are also getting into it, and then you're at their house, and the next thing you know, you start putting bands together. And that's really what it comes down to. I really had never thought, like when I think back, I don't think I had any of those sort of like, I'm going to be a cowboy or an astronaut or whatever the kids kind of dream about being, a fireman, a policeman. I was always like, I want to play music. I think, the first time, I can't really remember. Like people always go, what was the, when you talk to older people, it's always like, they were watching the Ed Sullivan Show.
Oh, yeah, and the Beatles.
Yeah, and it just changed everything. And I go, well, we're way after the fact on that, but it still had a similar effect, because I remember like my mother going, oh yeah, here's my Beatles record or records. And it was kind of like, oh, Paul, he was the cute one or whatever. And I'm kind of like looking at this sort of 4-headed monster, like they just look like, they all look the same to me as a child, because they all dress the same and have the same haircut.
Yeah.
I mean, they were, that's the shorter one, and this is the, whatever. And then the music was just so like intoxicating. And then just watching them play was just sort of like, it was sort of like prior to the Beatles, it had been something else. And then the Beatles became about bands and about, writing your own songs, that kind of stuff. So, and then it's Kiss, and then it's everything else. And that sort of lures us all in as kids. And punk rock came along. And that's when I really kind of started to play music, because, you start playing music before you can actually really play.
So, of course you do. Of course you do.
So, yeah. So thank God for punk rock, because you could just kind of, bash things around and have fun with your friends. But, that's sort of part of the fun. So yeah, like to answer your question, yeah, that's really all I ever thought I would do.
Right. And so who are some of your early musical influences, Todd?
Well, I would say, initially, I think things like, when I was a child, Elvis and the Beatles would be the things that were in my parents' record collections. Right. My father was, an outlaw country guy. So Johnny Cash and Willie Nelson and those kind of guys sort of floated around, but they felt pretty rock and roll, and still kind of do, actually, at least in attitude, you know what I mean? But then I remember going to see the Kids Are All Right was a film about the Who.
Ooh, yeah.
And it made a massive impact on me, because up to that point, I never really thought of it. It was hard for me to call the Beatles an influence, because I thought they were just sort of like I say, they just seemed like they just came from out of nowhere, like just sort of like this machine that just sort of like, it didn't seem like something you could do. You know what I mean? Like it didn't feel like, to me, it didn't feel like a career option. And Elvis is the same way. Elvis seemed like he was a superhero in those outfits.
Of course, yes.
And the Who was just sort of like, I just saw Pete Townsend as this gangly kid, and it was really in a lot of ways the gateway to punk rock, in that it was so aggressive, and the smashing of the guitars and all that kind of stuff. Like when you listen to the music now, it's very clearly pop songs, those early Who songs.
Right.
But it was very much, that film really kind of blew my mind, and then very quickly after that, things like Kiss and Cheap Trick and like I said, the punk rock, the New York Dolls and all that kind of stuff, sort of, I found that, and it's sort of, then you get into the Pistols and the Clash and the Ramones, especially the Ramones and all that kind of stuff. It really that was such a beautiful time, because I think of kids today just finding music and going like, whether it's like, I like this Rolling Stones song. It's like, oh man, strap in, because you got like 60 years of music
to catch up on.
Yeah, to just dig in and have a blast. Because that's what I did at the time. Led Zeppelin, or like Led Zeppelin John Bonham was already gone. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, to be young enough to kind of go and just hear all those records in at once. It was kind of like, I mean, I had a lot of really cool people. I used to wear this jacket, and I had the Who on the back of my jacket. And in 7th grade, or grade 7, as we say in Canada, I live in the U.S. So I'm polluted by all these. But I had the Who on the back of my jacket, and my grade 7 teacher said to me, Jimmy Page is a better guitar player than Pete Townsend. And I remember just being kind of like a teacher is interacting with me about this rock and roll thing that every other adult has just been kind of like, ugh, you know, kind of like, ugh, turn it down, you know.
Right.
And I was
cool
like,
teacher.
And I remember like, yeah, he was amazing. I don't think he really realizes how much of an influence he was. Actually, I'm sorry, he was my 8th grade teacher. My 7th grade teacher was a guitar player. So between the two of them, and they were roommates, which is funny because when I think back on it, they were probably 25 years old, you know, and I keep in contact with one of them, not so much the other, but this out of nowhere, he goes to me because I was always kind of like, I wasn't a great student because I could not focus. You know what I mean? Like I was like, ugh, this is all gross. Whenever I would actually kind of whenever I put in the effort, it would actually be like, oh, this makes sense. But my teacher, Mr. Hartle, Jim Hartle was his name. He goes, if you get above, I can't remember what it was, like above 65, 70% on this test, I will give you my old Led Zeppelin records, because he was at the time he was replacing his records. I don't know if it was with vinyl or the next. It would have been vinyl. I think he was like, because his records were all played out and beat down. And they're not that bad. I still have them. So he said, you know, if you get above this, I'll give you Led Zeppelin records. And I was so intrigued by Led Zeppelin because of him talking about it. I wasn't really familiar with. I'd seen the photos in the magazines and stuff like that. So I went and bought Led Zeppelin 2, which to this day is still my favorite album by them. And I just, you know, picked up the needle and put it down, and it was radical.
Magic.
It was radical compared to what I had been listening to. It sounded really dark, like the devil, and it just sounded, and drugs and just everything. Meanwhile, it's just kind of like, it's like the blues and it's like a whole lot of other things, but it was so heavy. I listened to the first side of that album for what feels like months or weeks. Like I didn't even turn it over yet because I was like so like blown away by the first side of the album that when I turned it over and it went, I think it's bow now, 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 now. And I was like, oh my God. It's like, there's, so then he gave me Led Zeppelin 1. He gave me, did he give me 3? Probably. He gave me Physical Graffiti. Quite a few like of the records, like he just sort of like Houses of the Holy or whatever. He was kind of like, here you go, whatever. And then sometimes I wouldn't get above 70. So I'd be like, too bad.
No records for you.
And I'd be totally bummed. Yeah. But it was kind of an interesting, like I said, the 7th grade teacher, grade 7 teacher was a guitar player. And he was one of the first guys that I had some junky Sears guitar. And I would go over to his place. No, you know what it was? I had an acoustic guitar, and he loaned me an electric guitar, which was just a beat kind of Sears guitar, because he had this Gibson Les Paul. He had a Gibson Les Paul, which I've got probably some up here. But at the time, it was like he had Excalibur in his house. It was just like, whoa, he has a Gibson Les Paul. And he played in a band with guys from high school. So I was junior, or not even junior high. I'm not even sure what you call that. But I was, just a kid, and there was a band, and Mr. Mac was the guitar player in that band, and he played a Gibson Les Paul. And that was like, to this day, very, very mind-blowing to me. So we still keep in contact, because just the other day he posted a picture of himself with that guitar, and I go, dude, is that the guitar? He goes, it is 1978 or 79. I can't remember what year that guitar is. And I was like, oh man, that guitar was just like, they exist, beyond television or magazines, Like I was like obsessed with guitar magazines. It was like all my friends wanted to look at girls in like whatever. And I was like, yeah, she's cute. Look at this,
But look at this. This is really pretty.
Girls hadn't been invented just quite yet. It was the next summer or something like that I became, oh, right, girls. Yeah. But yeah.
Yeah, well, playing guitar will definitely lead you to the next level with the women. That's for sure.
that is true. Up one summer you're invisible, or 1 year at school you're invisible. The next year, you're all your weirdness is completely acceptable because you play guitar, or you're in a rock band or something like that.
Right. And all those girls now that thought you were weird back then are just kicking themselves, I'm sure.
I remember specifically having a girlfriend when I was, you know, in like grade 9 or whatever like that, and it didn't work out. And I was a dorky kid with glasses, all tall and awkward. And then like a couple years later, my hair was long and I didn't have glasses anymore. And she would say to my new girlfriend, she, he was the dorkiest guy like last year at school. And I'm like, okay, thank you.
And that's why you're the ex.
Hey, she was probably a very happy, nice Saskatchewan lady. Yeah.
Oh, there you go. So, Todd, can you tell us about Age of Electric?
Of course.
There for a minute, yeah.
Well, there's so much to talk about. I mean, honestly, even just recently, I talked to those guys on a semi-daily basis. We always have this sort of group chat going about nonsense, and I'm always like laughing. But even just recently, like next year is the 30th anniversary of our EP, the Ugly EP, which had Ugly on it, which came out and ended up being a bit of a hit for us, and it led to a whole lot of other things. But it's really interesting because so I had played in a bunch of like cover bands. We didn't even know there was another way to do this because
Right.
I started as a kid playing. When I first started playing music, I started playing in bands, and they were way older than me. These guys were like, they would take us out of town. Every weekend we'd be in Ituna or Priestville. You know all those towns.
I did Priestville, yeah.
Yeah, all those Saskatchewan towns. I'd be playing high school dances on Fridays and Saturdays. So we would, you know, I would often miss chunks of Fridays at school and miss sometimes chunks of Mondays. My parents weren't super thrilled about it, but I was actually making money, which is the funny thing is you know, I never had that high school job packing groceries or something like that.
Right, like who needs a paper route when you can go?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like my job was playing in a band on weekends, and you know, it was. I mean, when I talked to a lot of my friends, like Slash and guys like that, their scene was like you put a band together, you wrote songs, and then you went and played, and you tried to drum up, you know, that kind of thing. But where I grew up, it just didn't feel like that was a thing. There was a punk rock scene, but I just got sucked into that world, and then from that, it just sort of everything sort of leads to the next thing. Like, you know, then a guy says, "Hey, come play in our band, and we'll pay you this," and "Come play in our band, we'll pay you that," and you go, "Oh, okay." Like, and you know, and I look back on it, and it seems like I had it made in the shade, but we were making zero, like not good money, but I didn't have rent. I lived on the road. I lived like, you know, no fixed address.
Yeah.
And then so I did that. And then Kurt, the drummer for the Age of Electric, came on as he was roadieing for one of my bands, a band called The Infants from Lanigan, Saskatchewan, which was the first real band that, you know, we took on the road. And Kurt and I were like fast friends. We were like, those guys were older than me. So Kurt and I were like the same age. We're obsessed with a lot of the same music. And his little brother played guitar. And although I was playing bass, my little brother also played bass. And I was sort of like, well, I'll move over to the rhythm guitar, Paul Stanley lead singer position, and we'll put a band together. But they were very young. They were still in high school, and we had just gotten out of high school. So we were playing around clubs, and I went Alberta and Kurt went Winnipeg, which was funny, and just played in different bands. And then one day just decided, hey, let's do this. And we went back to Lanigan, oddly enough, Saskatchewan, and put Age of Electric together. Those guys were just out of high school. Ryan Dahl and my brother John were just out of high school, and we just put it together and started playing around. We had to play the cover gigs in Alberta, which was a huge market back then, the late 80s. We put that together in 89. So the band first came together in 89, and we were very young, but we played all those cover markets, but we were writing songs right away. And we had the audacity to kind of stick our songs in the set. And no one really said anything to us, but every once in, like, none of the clubs ever said like, you can't do that. But every once in a while I'd have somebody like, you know, some manager of another band that were friends of ours, like, you know, how can you do that? You know, if you're taking out like a song that everybody knows by whatever cover song and stick one of yours in, you know, it's kind of like hurting your set. And then I was like, man, you really got it all backwards, bro. It's like, and we sort of lived in that scene until it literally died out, because eventually it became more and more, well, it was also sort of like very hard rock, like long hair, leather pants and like we were kids that grew up on, our tastes were super diverse. Like, although we kind of played in the hard rock crowd, we all loved all kinds of things, whether it was like pop music or goth, and definitely punk rock and heavy metal and hard rock. And we were kids from Saskatchewan. We didn't really think too much about having a mohawk or whatever kind of thing. I just sort of like Joey Ramone had long hair. That's punk rock to me. So we just kind of like lived in that world, and then we wrote music, we made videos, and we did stuff, and we really, really, really built an audience. And as time went by, when the 90s started to kind of rear their head and just change the game completely, we just sort of naturally kind of grew into it. I mean, everybody sort of makes it out like as if on Monday it was this, and then Tuesday it was a different thing, but it wasn't. If you look back at like all the bands that started to kind of present themselves in the 90s, there was extreme stuff like even the Red Hot Chili Peppers were sort of bubbling under for a long time as this kind of super cool like other thing, but they weren't a mainstream act until a little later on. And then Jane's Addiction was super crazy, like super like left of field, but kind of hard rock, you know what I mean? And
Right.
and a lot of that stuff, and Jellyfish and so many other bands, King's X, all these things that really started to present this other scene that was so much more our cup of tea than a lot of the things that metal was doing at that time. So we just sort of started to gravitate in that direction. And so when bands like Pearl Jam and Alice in Chains and Soundgarden were all, to me, they just seemed like the next generation of rock bands. When
For
you look
sure.
back now, they kind of seem like, they just definitely seem like hard rock bands, but just a sort of a different flavor. And we just sort of gravitated in that direction, just like, because we were still very young. We got signed out of New York City to a label, to Mercury Records. Our management was out of New York. It was a very interesting time to be some kids from Saskatchewan. We quickly, well, not quickly, but we eventually moved to Vancouver. Around 92, we all relocated to Vancouver because Bob Rock, the producer who did Metallica, the Black Album, and Motley Crue's Dr. Feelgood and records like that, he's like, I want to record you guys. I really like your band. And we were like, oh, wow, cool. So we literally... we moved out to Vancouver. I remember my apartment was, me and my girlfriend at the time. It was like, I think $450 a month, which seemed like
probably a lot back then.
It did, because up to that point, I didn't really have a place because I was like living on the road.
Right.
I would crash at my girlfriend's when I was off, but so we relocated. We all moved out, and we really stepped away from playing like at cover bars and stuff like that, because that scene was dying, and we really were focused on writing and recording and becoming, I hate to say real band, but focusing on that side of what we do. And Bob couldn't get us a deal. We recorded some stuff with him. We eventually took 5 or 6 of the songs. It's been a minute since I've actually paid attention to that, from those sessions, and put it out as the Ugly EP. So the song Ugly, we shot a video for it in Winnipeg, and Much Music picked it up, and it really kind of created this momentum that took us to this next thing where Mercury signed us. And then Mercury, by the time we had finished the record in classic record company form, a different president had come into power, and as will happen, they often go like, well, I'm getting rid of all this.
Right.
I didn't sign any of this. So,
right.
And it happens all the time. It did back then. I'm not really sure these days. It's a totally different game now. But anyway, we had the foresight. I think we were just, young and full of piss and vinegar, where we sort of said, well, we'd like to keep Canada independent, because up to that point we had created our own indie label for ourselves, and had sort of like, been going across the country back and forth selling records out of the back of our van or and just kind of like selling them at the gigs and doing all that kind of stuff. And it was, it was lucrative for us. That's how we financed our entire thing. When I say lucrative, it was, it's like we were still living hand to mouth, but
it was all relevant back then. Right?
Yeah, but I mean, like, back when I didn't really care about, like, I don't know,
it wasn't about the money. It wasn't about
I didn't care. I didn't care about having a Mercedes Benz or a Rolex watch. It was just kind of like, we just wanted to play music. So basically we Make a Pestapet, the final Age of Electric record, on Mercury's dime out of the US. That went away, but we had full rights to take it to Canada and go, just we went to Universal and they kicked in for promo money, video money, and
Nice.
we broke even pretty quickly. And then we broke up like idiots. It was sort of like we'd clawed and scratched for 10 years to try and get to a point. And then it's a real testament to, I have no regrets about it, but I do wish we had the foresight to kind of go, because when you're young, you think like, well, I'll just do it again.
Right. It's so easy.
I'll just do it with somebody else. You don't really take into account that this took a long time and a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. So my brother and I put together Static and Stereo with our other brother, Ryan. And by then, the record industry had shifted so much with downloading and all that kind of stuff that it really was a very difficult thing to make work. We sort of like, one example that I always kind of bring up that I've always find kind of amusing was that up to that point, I remember the label would always say, because we used to sell our records on the road because we were an independent rock band.
Right.
And that was how we did it. And then the label was like, no, you don't do that anymore because the records sell in the store and they keep track of everything. So that's how you know what your sales are. And then you can chart. So we did go gold on the last stage of Electric record. Nice. And then by the time I went into Static and Stereo, it was kind of like, yeah, take these, sell these. It was kind of like it was a full Hail Mary. Like no one knew what the hell to do anymore because the industry was so, completely turned upside down by downloading and everything else. And we'd play shows and I'd be like, man, there's a lot of people here tonight. If every one of these people has bought this record, we should be
like rolling in it.
Yeah, we should be at this certain charting level or whatever, and it just wasn't the case. And it was, when I look back on that, a lot of people don't remember, but I remember talking about a few years later when somebody brought up Edge Fest, which was a series of concerts we would have across Canada.
I remember, yeah.
And Moist, I Mother Earth, Tea Party, the Matthew Good Band, all of those bands and a bunch more I can't even think of had all gone away. A lot of them are back. Moist's back, the Tea Party's back, I Mother Earth does stuff. I think RWP still they were the only ones that really sort of powered through. Everybody else just got crushed because it was like there was a business model of how you did this, and then that business model was completely like pulled out from all of it, out from under all of us. And that's when I kind of started producing, and I made my own solo album, and then eventually found my way here. It was just, I don't regret, because I really feel like the Static and Stereo record, at the time, it felt like a complete failure, but still to this day, people come up to me and go, "That's my favorite thing you've ever done." And I go, "Wow." I wish you told me that at the time, because at the time it was like, oh boy, it just felt really rough. But no one.
It's all subjective, though. You know what I mean? What somebody's going to find is it's all subjective. And so, Todd, the DVD you're just speaking of, is that the Live in Toronto DVD?
I did a solo Live in Toronto DVD a few years back. Yeah, that's more of an acoustic thing, because in 2013 I made an acoustic record, because I always was very, very enamored with Johnny Cash's American recordings that Rick Rubin did for him. And I don't think a lot of people understood what I was doing. I think a lot of people were like, you're kind of confused. But I was like, I always just loved that I would put the headphones on or the earbuds in and listen to Johnny Cash just play to me. Like there was no sort of like, orchestra.
Cluster of sounds.
Yeah, there was no orchestra or a band. It was just literally Johnny on a microphone with his guitar singing songs. And I was just sort of like, it's really raw. I found it quite transcendent. Yeah, like I felt, it was very, very raw. And I just thought, like, wouldn't that be so cool to be able to do that? And a lot of the songs that I included on it were actually songs that I had intended to be full rock band songs. But, I just started toying with the idea, and I just kind of get when I get kind of on a certain path, I just end up kind of going down there. So I always had this romantic notion of just, starting in Victoria and just making my way across to, far East Canada, just playing acoustic shows, just with a guitar and on a Greyhound bus. Preferably not that, but I mean, like, something that kind of
just lower scale, right? Like just lower key.
There's something super romantic about the idea as a musician of just kind of like getting up, playing songs, and being able to do it I mean, I'll be honest with you. In 1998, I think it was Kevin Kane from the Grapes of Wrath. I don't know if you remember that band. He plays in the Northern Pikes now.
Right.
I love that guy. I haven't seen him in years, but he just called me one day and he goes, "Hey, we're doing this acoustic show over at the Railway Club in Vancouver," which is still there, and it's an amazing place. I'm at that age now whenever I say this gig, it's always like that. It's not there anymore. Don't look for it. But the Railway's still there. The Commodore is still there. And I would go, and he goes, "We're doing this show. It's a tribute to, I think it might have been a breast cancer benefit or something like that. So it was kind of like all us guys are going to play girl songs, like songs, whether Stevie Nicks or whoever."
Right.
And I thought, oh, what a cool idea. And he goes, "Yeah, so just, think of some songs and come up and play and acoustically by yourself." And I go, "I'm in." Click. It was probably back then when I probably could do that before cell phones.
Right.
98, right? So after I hung up, I thought to myself, I've never done this. What the hell am I talking about? Like standing there with an acoustic guitar by myself just seemed like, who the hell are you fooling? So and I did. I got up and Sheryl Crow or whatever, a bunch of cool female songs that I loved. And,
right.
And it was very liberating, and it really sort of opened up a whole other side of myself where it's sort of like, there's nothing between me and there's also no safety net of loud drums and guitars and stuff. It's just you, right. Your voice cracks or you hit the wrong chord or whatever it is. It's like, it's just you. So
it's kind of like being on stage with your pants off. Like literally, it's just like
it feels the closest.
Somewhat naked feeling. I would imagine.
I would imagine it's not that far off from stand-up comedy, although, well, apparently I'm going to try that. I have never really tried that. The idea of like, then it's just you and a microphone. Then you're like, there's nothing between you and the audience. But yeah, I know it's something I really kind of fell in love with. So I would kind of write songs more with that in mind. And eventually in 2013, between a couple of Slash tours, I just decided to make one and put it out more as kind of like a thank you to all the people who were following us at that time and the whole time,
For sure. Speaking of Slash, what's that like? How does that even happen that you connect with Slash?
Well, I've been living here. I put a band together, the Sin City Sinners, with Brent Muscat from Fast Pussycat, and we would just play, and we would have friends come play with us, guys from like, the New York Dolls or the Dead Boys, or George Lynch from Dokken came to play. Slim Jim Phantom, that's what my stand-up bass is all about. I taught myself stand-up bass, so whenever Slim Jim would come to town, we would play rockabilly. It's just really cool to be able to jam with people, you know what I mean? And Brent Fitz, the drummer in Slash's band, is an old friend from Canada. He's from Winnipeg. And I knew him in the touring circuit back, when we were kids. Like he was in a band touring around Canada, and so was I. So he got the gig playing drums with Slash, just because Slash was getting ready to promote his solo album in 2010. He made this solo album with a bunch of different singers. Chris Cornell's on it, Lemmy's on it, Iggy Pop, nice. Kid Rock, and Miles Kennedy, of course, sings 2 songs on there. So he put this band, and at the time, I was like, when Brent told me he was playing drums with Slash, I was like, that's awesome, dude. That's so cool. Right? But I never really thought anything about like, can I play in the band?
Yeah, me too.
I honestly just sort of like, I had so much going on my own plate that I was kind of like, but anyway, I always tell this story because it's better to tell the full story, because otherwise I just he called. But my father was down here, and because I was trying to buy a house, so which is interesting to consider that I was buying a house even before I even joined Slash's band. But things were going well, and I was like, okay, great. Well, I'm gonna the real estate was rock bottom, so I'm like, okay, well let's. So I was like sitting at a Chili's one night after looking at a bunch of houses, and my father and I were eating, and the phone rings, and it's Brent Fitz, and he goes, "Hey, can you be here in Hollywood or in North Hollywood at noon to jam?" And I go, and at the time, I didn't take that to mean to audition for the band or whatever, just come jam.
So he meant come. Did you want to come jam with Slash? Is that?
Yeah. We said with Slash, and the guy go, of course.
And you went like, oh, I don't know. Let me check my count. Yeah, hell yeah.
The first thing I did was look across the table at my father and go, you want to. It's like a 3.5-hour drive from here.
Right.
We do it all the time. I go, sometimes you'll just be like, hey, let's go to LA. Jump in the car and go. So I looked at my dad and I just said, do you want to go to LA tomorrow? And he said, I've never been to LA. I go, well, I guess we better go.
Yeah.
So we hopped in the car and drove there. And then long story short, it kind of, so the thing is that I had, and it was really kind of heartbreaking in a way, because I had so much going on here and I was really invested in playing in multiple different places around town. But when things like this happen, you just kind of go, you have to have a really hard look at life and go, okay, well, I guess this is this now. And, you know, it was like, boom, Slash announced on Twitter, the new bass player's name is Todd Kerns. This is so exciting. And I'm like, dude, whoa, you know, and we were like on Jay Leno the next week. It was crazy. It was nuts. It was like, it was like a complete whirlwind. And then I think one of our first gigs was, we played the Roxy in Sunset Strip, which I'd played in 91 with the Age of Electric. And then like immediately we were like Melbourne, Australia. One of the first things we did was Melbourne. I'd only been to Europe once, and that was with Faster Pussycat in 2006. So when Brent asked me, hey, I'm putting together this version of Faster Pussycat, do you want to play guitar in that? We're going to, you know, Italy and Greece and France. And I was like, hell yeah. I go, yeah.
Sign me up. Yeah.
I was like, up to that point, you know, when considering it was that far into my career, I had never been overseas. So I was like, yeah, of course. And then I came back here and it just didn't present itself. So then all of a sudden I'm in Slash's band, and then we're around the planet. Well, it's been 12 years, you know, it's been 12 years that I've been doing
2010, since 2010 is when you kind of hooked up. Right.
Yeah.
And so are there, because I just think touring with Slash, and I imagine shenanigans. Are there shenanigans?
Not so much. The most interesting thing about joining Slash at that time was, you know, I was a massive fan. Appetite for Destruction was a major thing for me. And I was hugely supportive of Velvet Revolver and everything that they'd done up to that point, the Snake Pit and all that kind of stuff. But I remember playing with him and being like, wow, this guy is nothing like you expect him to be. Because up to that point, you'd only ever seen like these kind of like Jack Daniels, this constant cigarette going. And the guy I was getting to know was not that guy. He was hyper focused, incredibly intelligent. Like he's just, it's kind of like one of those weird things where everybody assumes he's this rock and roll animal, which of course he was back then. He was a kid, right? Those guys lived hard. When all 5 of those original members of the band are all still alive today, and it's by the grace of God, because you know, Duff had his pancreas explode, and Slash has a ticker going, you know, and Steven had like strokes. You know, it's like, it's amazing to consider that all 5 of those guys are still with us.
Just survived it all, right?
Yeah. Survived it. Yeah, I mean, it says something with their constitution. But so when I got to know him, I remember like kind of like playing and we're just jamming, and I'm like looking at him and going, something's kind of weird to me, and I couldn't figure. I go, oh, he's not smoking. I go, that's kind of because you're just constantly aware of that cigarette in his mouth,
right?
But he had sort of turned this new leaf. He was like very. I mean, he was kind of an you know, if you keep doing this, you're gonna not make it kind of thing. Yeah. So he had really changed his game, and he had became hyper focused. And I mean, he's one of those people. He's one of the most hardworking people I've ever known. It's quite inspiring. So then we go on the road, and it's all about the gig. You know, I think that's true of you know, because we weren't 20 years old. We were all grown ass men, and it was sort of like people got kids and people got this and that, and there was and again, I'm what I refer to myself as sober, but I'm not like I didn't get caught trying to like rob a gas station or something like that. It was, you know, I don't have a sort of crazy backstory. I just kind of never really was when I say never, I definitely did my fair share of partying, but I became so hyper focused on being the best I could be and performing at my best level that I sort of, you know, I just became kind of, I just decided to try not to be a disaster, you know. And you know, I've been around
living in Las Vegas, no doubt. I don't know, living in Vegas. I don't know, man. I think if I lived in Vegas, I'd be in rehab in about a month.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, it's sort of like becomes a choice of like, you know, you just actively have to kind of. Well, discipline is a very difficult word to spell, and there's a reason for that, you know. So but it was never really a hard thing for me. When I moved down here, I was playing like 5 nights a week at different things and doing all these kind of, and I was singing, and I was like, well, it's really challenging singing all the time. So the alcohol's not helping. So I'm
Right.
going to cut that out immediately. And, I wasn't a smoker, so all that kind of stuff wasn't really a factor. But, when I joined Slash's band, it was sort of like, well, he's recovering everything. So I was kind of like, so Brent Fitz and I were both kind of like of that same mindset of like, we just don't drink anymore because it's, and when I say that, it doesn't mean I might not have a glass of wine once in a while or something like that.
Right,
But
sure.
that's more like very rare and very sort of like, oh, well, let's try that because I have a fascination for wine and different things. But it's not really like when we started playing with Slash, it was just sort of, it just became very, very sober. And Miles Kennedy he drinks, but on the road, he rarely partakes because he's so about his voice, you know what I mean? And so it became a very sort of, lots of laughs, lots of adventures, like, your first time in Paris and your first time in Dublin, Ireland, and in London. I mean, these things are a massive thing to me. But
does it ever seem surreal, Todd? Sorry to cut you off there. Is there ever a point where the whole freaking thing just seems so surreal?
Yeah. It really does, because the weirdest stuff is watching like a James Bond movie, and they'll be like, because it's like all these exotic places, and he's in Milan, Italy, and then he's in Budapest, as we're watching it, I go, been there. Oh, there's the temple we went that time. I mean, like I'm literally like watching James Bond movies and going like, I've been to these places. It's so surreal.
Right.
So,
and not as a tourist either, like touring with Slash in these places. Wow.
Well, the really challenging thing though is because often you're sort of breezing through in a very sort of, you're just kind of, sometimes you don't get to see as much as you'd like to see. Like we've been to like South America a million times. Well, many times, and I've never really gotten to see a whole lot of it because it's so much more chaotic down there, and it's not quite as like it's the fans hang out outside the hotel like en masse. It's crazy. But because sometimes you're literally breezing through town. We'll drive overnight from one city to the next. You wake up, you go to sound check, and then you play. I remember the first time we went to the Colosseum in Rome. We literally woke up on the bus and it was like, we got 3 hours, and we just kind of like hopped in a cab and
suck in as much as you can in that short time frame, right?
Yeah, you see everything, and you're all like kind of completely exhausted, but it's that's sort of how you do it. But then we have had the very good luck of being in places like London or Ireland or Scotland or Paris, Helsinki. Like there's quite a few places I could name that I've been over and over and over again, that you get to know, like, oh, that cool coffee shop, or
that's a good place to get wine, or eat, or
you have friends that that are there, and it's super surreal to me because, like I said, I'm from Lanigan, Saskatchewan. So when you talk about London, England, you may as well be talking about Mars, and when you talk about Tokyo, Japan, which is another one, you may as well be talking about Krypton, and then you talk about Moscow, Russia, you may as well be talking about Tatooine.
Crazy talk.
It's not; those aren't real places. But I've been to Moscow 3 times, I think. It's just bizarre, and it's the kind of thing where you just never, it's never taken for granted. You know what I mean? Like I've always been like
grateful.
Try and drink this in, because one day you're gonna go, oh, I've been there. I'd be like, and then my grandkids would be like, okay, Grandpa.
Yeah.
Oh, seriously, I've been there. Yeah.
When I was a wee lad, I was there 3 times.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I've been to Paris. Oh, I know that place. Yeah, I knew that. There was a great coffee shop that we used to go to. Go, okay, Grandpa.
Right on, Todd. we're going to take a second and we got a ton of comments coming in here.
Oh,
so
I kind of forget that we're live. So yeah,
that's okay. It's all good. So Joshua Rolls, as a local musician, good friend of mine, he just says, yay. He's just been looking forward to this interview. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, Perry Boyko, who's a huge fan of the show. Hi, Kelly. Hey, Todd. I met you, Todd, in Regina, Saskatchewan. You used to play the bar Shooters all the time.
Hell yeah, we did.
I remember that bar. Yeah. I think I drank underage at that bar.
I think it eventually was just a parking lot. I can't remember.
I think so. Yeah.
See, there's one of those ones where we say it's not there anymore. There's a lot of clubs I played that aren't there anymore. Yeah. And Regina, I played a lot of different places.
There were some good places there to play, like the Paddock, and like
the Paddock was sort of before my time. I remember going to going like playing in Regina, but first of all, that was kind of like the A room to play. So I was always playing somewhere else. And then
at that time.
And then it closed before I had a chance to be like, of that level.
Right. Yeah, that was a great bar. That was another one I was sneaking into underage, and not to drink because I was so obsessed with live music.
Me too. I used to sneak into the bars to watch bands. I didn't really care about booze. Yeah.
Right. So another local musician, Sean Lorraine, is just saying hi. This was something I was going to actually ask you about, Todd, but Phil Days is asking it. So he says, "Hey, Todd, will you be back with Raiding the Rock Vault?"
Yeah, we're actually starting up in June. It's one of those crazy things because I'm very, very busy, but I never really intended to be a part of the show. It was just sort of like a very funny thing where they had a very successful show here in Vegas, and then they were going to do one in Branson, Missouri, oddly enough. And I just happened to be home between tours, and they called me up and said, "Hey man, would you like to come and we're going to do it, like keep the one that's going in Vegas, but we're going to send some guys out to Branson, Missouri." And I go, what is that? I didn't know anything about Branson, Missouri.
What's a Branson?
Yeah, exactly. But it was Hugh McDonald, the bass player for Bon Jovi, the keyboard player for Billy Idol, Paul Trudeau. Who else was in that version? Well, Rowan was in there from Dio. He's a very good friend. He plays in the version here as well. So anyway, it was a great lineup. And I was like, oh, John, my friend John, from the Babies, that band, and then Johnny, who has since passed away, sadly, who replaced Sebastian Bach in Skid Row. So anyway, it was like, yeah, it sounds like fun. I'm like literally like not doing anything. So my wife and I, we just went out to Branson, and Branson is like, I always say it's kind of like Vegas as designed by like Ned Flanders or something. It's like this really kind of like all these like things you can go to, museums. There's a Titanic museum and wax museum, all these kind of fun things to go do, but it's very family oriented.
Very wholesome. Right.
Very wholesome.
Yeah, Ned Flanders. Yeah.
Exactly. And then we had a blast. We were there for like 2 weeks, and it was just like, for whatever reason, I remember Hugh, who I love to death. He was out with Bon Jovi right now, but he was like, he did not want to go. He goes, ugh. But he had been like, they wanted one of the kind of main guys to go out as the sort of musical director to kind of see this thing through. And he goes, okay. But then he did not want to leave. Everybody was buying condos out there and stuff. Like everybody's like looking at condos. And I'm like, you guys are actually buying condos out here in Branson, Missouri? Dude, they're really affordable. I go, okay. I was like, and then we went back another time too. But anyway, and then when I came back here, it turned into like, you kind of realize that a lot of the main guys here, Robin McCauley is currently on tour with Michael Schenker, and the drummer plays in Yes, and everybody plays with somebody. You know what I mean? Like
right.
Tracy Guns from LA Guns was in it, and Doug Aldrich from Whitesnake was in it, and guys like that. So hey, he's gonna be out of town. Can you come and fill in? And I'm like, if I'm here, I'm like, hell yeah, that sounds like fun. I know the show now because it's like a show that you learn and you go and do. So you just kind of slide down, and that's the best thing about being here. And one of the reasons that I love Vegas so much is that every time I walk into a casino, I think to myself, how many gigs are in this casino as a musician?
Right. That's where your brain goes right away, right? Like
I'm immediately like, there's a piano guy over there and an acoustic guy over there. There's a duo over here. There's a showroom where there's a full band playing. Then there's a national actor, international band touring over here, Earth, Wind, and Fire, or whoever's,
whoever, yeah.
So I find that to me is really inspiring. So to have somebody like a gig in town here where I can go and run over and play with some guys that I love and really respect, and then come home and sleep in my bed.
Right. How cool. It doesn't get better than that. It really doesn't get better than that.
Honestly, like the older I get, the more tempting it is to be like, maybe I should just do something like this. But then of course, my phone rings and it's Slash and you ready for another run around the world?
And you're just like, yeah, I am.
Yeah. And by then you're like, of course. Yeah, of course I am. Yeah. Let's go do that.
There'll be time to do play a gig and sleep in your own bed.
That's kind of that's the retirement plan.
There you go. Yeah, absolutely. So Lee Canfield, who is a huge fan of the show, and poor Lee is sick with COVID right now, and he still managed to tune in. So he says, "Hello, Kelly, and good evening, Todd. To a dude who wears many rock and roll hats, whether it's Static and Stereo, Age of Electric, Todd Kerns band / Toque, You just do it all so well. You are a Canadian national treasure. Rock on.
Wow, that means a lot. Thank you.
Yeah.
And get well soon.
Yeah, we're all praying for you. We're sending you a positive mojo, Lee. Positive mojo your way. Yeah. Chris Knowles is saying, awesome, Kelly. Todd is a true rocker. Killer interview. Rox Hunter, who was actually from the Yukon. He's joining us from the Yukon. Rox is a very talented musician up there as well. He says, hello from the Yukon. Thank you for this very cool interview.
You know, I've never been to the Yukon. I've never been.
Is that right, eh?
Northwest Territories. I mean, for all the places that I played, there was gigs up there, like back when I was a kid, and there would be like, you know, these guys.
There were. You go for 6 weeks. Like we would go up there for like 6 weeks and just make a shit ton of money.
Yeah, and I was always like, well, how do we get to do that? And then again, like I say, it took us quite a while to go from the kind of like the kids table to the adults table musically.
Great analogy. I love it.
But by the time we got to the pseudo adults table, we had kind of already moved into being more focused on, you know, kind of writing our own music and that kind of stuff. So we kind of lost track of all that.
Right.
But I sure hope we can get up there. I know Slash is always threatening to try and go and find the new places that we can play. I played Alaska. He's never played Alaska. I go, well, we have to get to Alaska then.
That would be cool. Yeah. Go in the summertime. Oh, hey, guess who's in the house? Lisa Guliak.
No way. Speaking of
Priestville.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, Lisa, good to see you. Lisa, of course, is literally the premier photographer of all of our Canadian artists. Just a super talented photographer. Lovely human.
Amazing.
Brad Zybo is in the house just saying, wow. He's just listening to you, Todd. He just says, wow. Awesome. Yeah, tons and tons of comments. Gary Jones, good friend of mine. Hi, Kelly and Todd. Nice. This show came together. Damn it, good coffee. And speaking of which, my show sponsors, of course, are Writers and Rockers Coffee Company.
Sure, yeah.
And yours truly has his own line of company, or his own line of coffee with the company. Todd, yeah, Dammit Brew. I'm hooked on this stuff.
I'm glad.
I'm hooked.
It's so funny because
I'm drinking it right now.
All right. There you go. Yeah. No, it's one of those things that, again, like, it's so funny because I always say, like, all I want to do is play music. Like, I really don't, like, you know, like the t-shirt or more of a merch thing, all that stuff kind of took off. Like, you know, there's like all these, you know, other things that are going, and then things like coffee where people come at you and they say, you know, licensing this and licensing that. And it's all so exciting that, like, to me, it's like, you know, I'm a big Kiss fan. So I have stuff all over my house that says Kiss on it, you know, it's just like random crazy shit. And, you know, I wish I was making the kind of money Kiss was making doing it. But, you know, when someone comes at you and says, you know, what about this, what about that? And the coffee thing has really blown up. Like, I'm totally shocked.
It's huge.
It's one of their biggest sellers, I think. And I'm like, wow, I'm really blown away by that. So it really means a lot that people kind of like, well, hopefully they're enjoying the coffee, but I mean, it really means a lot that they're kind of supporting whatever, you know, my name happens to be upon. That's very exciting. I really appreciate that.
Right. And Writers and Rockers, what a cool concept, because coffee it's really become a thing. Like coffee.
It really has.
You know, it's not cool so much to drink anymore. And to, you know, back in the days in the 80s and 90s when there was tons of gigs and you could, you know, back then it's a different world now. I would agree. It's not cool to be that girl or that guy anymore, being wasted in the bar all the time. And coffee is a thing. So I think Robert Young's idea is like, what a cool concept.
It's the best.
You know, Writers and Rockers, and man, it's just damn good coffee, damn it.
Well, that's the important thing, yeah.
It really, really is. So you have a couple of upcoming gigs coming that I just wanted to mention. So the 27th to the 29th, we were talking about before the show in Nashville at Creatures Fest, where I understand you, Todd Kerns, will be trying your hand at comedy. What's that all about?
Well, it's a bizarre thing because that weekend is basically a Kiss convention, which I started playing with Bruce Kulick. Oddly enough, first time I played with Bruce Kulick was in 2010, just before the Slash call came in. Brent Fitz and I were already kind of doing stuff with Bruce. Bruce, of course, was in Kiss during the non-makeup years. The first time I ever saw Kiss was in Regina, Saskatchewan at the Agrodome in 85, I think it was. And Bruce was the guitar player. So it's a massive deal to me as a Kiss fan. And then the fact that, you know, Bruce is a dear friend of mine now. Right. But Brent Fitz had played with Bruce in his post-Kiss band called Union. So with John Corabi from Motley Crue, and they had this thing going. so that connection all came about from that. But so that weekend is going to be nuts because Ace Frehley's there, Peter Criss is there, Vinnie Vincent is there, and then Quiet Riot's going to play. Vixen, Chris Jericho, our good friend, the wrestler from Winnipeg, is playing with his kids' tribute band called Quarantine. So it's going to be a blast. It's one of those crazy things. So, and on top of that, I have a side. I did a record last year. I think it was a year ago, either today or yesterday, that we put out a record with a lineup called Minefield. I'm working my way around to this comedy question. It just happens to be all these things are connected. But Minefield was Jeremy and Matt from Ace Frehley's band,
cool.
and this guy named Brandon Fields. They had this project they were working on. They go, "Hey, dude, you want to sing a song on this?" And then it turned into basically doing the entire album together. And it's a really great album. And if you look up Minefield, we have a single called "Alone Together" that was really, really well received. But that we're gonna do a song together. All those guys are gonna be there because of course Ace is gonna be there, Ace Frehley's gonna be there. So Matt and Jeremy will be there. And then so there's an acoustic thing that we're doing, there's this jam thing we're doing, and then there's this comedy thing that they're doing. And my friend Craig Gass and Courtney are going to be, they're just major, like very, very funny people. Craig is on the Howard Stern show.
Cool.
And so he's an amazing impressionist. He does Gene Simmons, Paul Stanley. He does a ton, like Al Pacino, and his Sebastian Bach is insane. But anyway, and they're very funny people, and they do this thing where they kind of like, they did it at a few others where a couple of guys from Ace Frehley's band had done, like a 5-minute set of comedy. And they came at me and I was kind of like, first of all, it's a lot of work. Right. You're like, you're kind of like, I've got all this, this Kiss set to work up. And with Bruce, we play nothing but Kiss songs from his era, which is challenging. It's myself, Zach Throne from Corey Taylor, Slipknot, his solo band, and then Brent Fitz. And Zach sings all the Gene stuff and I sing all the Paul stuff. And it's really challenging because that stuff from that particular era is when Paul was singing at his peak. And then, so that's a big focus. And then the idea of kind of coming up with 5 minutes of like nonsense to talk about.
Like stand-up comedy? Are you doing like stand-up comedy straight up?
Yeah. Which is actually not that, I mean, I'm not that freaked out about it because to be honest, I've done stuff like that my whole life because I always get roped into making a speech at someone's wedding and all kinds of crap like that. And then playing as a front man in Vegas in all these different shows for years. It's just so, I'm so much more comfortable being on stage in whichever faction than I am at a, I don't know, family dinner with some relatives. Right.
Like, I get that.
It's just so normal to me, or a business meeting of some sort. You're like, but when you're on stage and you're making music and you're entertaining people, that feels really normal to me.
You're in your elements.
Yeah.
So
the comedy thing is definitely, but again, it's kind of like acting. Like I did a film, an indie film back in '97, I think it was. It was just one of those things. It was like, hey, do you want to? Well, it was weird. It was like I was walking around Shoppers Drug Mart on Davie in Vancouver. And somebody came up to me and said, this lady came up to me and she said, "Have you ever done any acting?" And I go, "No." "Would you be interested in reading for this part?" And I go, "I guess." I think I was I think I was pushing my kid in a stroller at the time. But I, looked like this and had tattoos and black hair. And
you've got a look. Like, you've definitely got a look. So
that was the amusing thing about it. Was just like, basically you're playing a musician who was a junkie. And this was the weirdest thing about it was a lot of my friends, especially in that time, was so exciting because in Vancouver, all my friends were musicians, like all the guys, all the girls. And if they weren't musicians, they were actors or they were like
artists of some kind.
Yeah, artists or trying to write scripts or whatever. And I was just surrounded by all this creativity. So I ended up acting in a bunch of stuff. But this film, it sort of did the rounds a little bit. It kind of resurfaces now and then. But it's one of those things where when someone approaches you with something like that, stand-up comedy or playing acoustic guitar by yourself or acting, there are always those kind of things where you go, I don't do this. That's weird. And it's the kind of things that I, for whatever reason, sort of gravitate towards where I kind of go like, yeah, it sounds kind of like awkward and uncomfortable and kind of mildly scary, it feels like, well, you got to do that once in a while, because I can get up, sing songs, play guitar all day long. It's
in
like
your sleep,
really
in your
normal.
sleep.
Yeah,
right?
it's like
Right. Yeah.
people always say, well, what do you do? Don't you get freaked out? I go, dude, I'm never nervous. Even Slash has a kind of mildly nervous, kind of stage frighty type thing, and I go, it never happened. And I don't mean that to be bragging. It's
Cocky or anything. No,
true.
just right.
I literally kind of feel like I cannot wait to get out there and play. It's my happy place, and
it's in your blood. It's so in your blood.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you get approached to play, to do an acting role as a junkie musician. Is that what you're saying, as a junkie musician?
Yeah, real stretch.
Did you feel did you feel offended by that almost?
Well, I think, they just see the hair.
Do I look like a junkie?
the hair and the tattoos.
And you're thin, and you're tall and thin. Yeah.
And they just sort of, they I go, why wouldn't you hire a real actor for this? But of course, they wanted, he was supposed to be a musician too, so they wanted it to have some legitimacy.
Authenticity, yeah.
Yeah. So I go, okay, well, yeah, I get it, and I appreciated it. And it was something that really kind of, it was weird, because there was, at that time in my life, we're talking like 97, between what I call the White Album, with a self-titled Age of Electric record in 95, 96, and then 97, 98 was the last Age of Electric record. So it was in between those records where, someone approached me, and I was kind of like literally at home, and I was kind of like, yeah, cool. Sounds like fun. And then that really started to present like we're getting an agent and going to getting parts. And I was kind of like, I really had to have a real heart to heart with myself, like, because music was still my love, and it was sort of like, it had all my attention. And I was just sort of like, I just don't think that's going to work, and I just sort of, there's a lot of times that I wouldn't call it regret. I remember going to see a movie called Underworld, Kate Beckinsale's film. Back, there was a bunch of those films, but I remember sitting in the theater once and going, that guy sure looks a lot like John Mann from The Spirit of the West. That one actor, that one vampire or whatever. And I was like, man, that guy looks like John Mann from Spirit of the West, a Vancouver band, right? Who were very successful. And then I'm that's definitely John Mann. By the end of the film, I go, wow, John Mann from Spirit of the West is in this major film. And I go, wow, good for him.
Wow, yeah.
I didn't realize he had, had that side of himself. So,
what's the movie called, Todd? Before I forget to ask, because people will be choked if
the film's called Horsey, but I don't know, it's one of those kind of, it was an independent film, so it kind of floats around and appears in different formats, but it was really fun to do, and I really, really enjoyed it. I've never really seen it in its entirety, because I'm not the kind of person, I don't really listen to myself, and I don't watch myself, and I probably won't watch this when you replay it someday, just because I'm that guy. Always like, I know what I sound like, I know what I sound like.
Yeah.
But
I hear that.
No, it's it's just kind of like, when these things present themselves, like I said, the acoustic stuff, acting, and now stand-up comedy is kind of like, yeah, it sounds like fun. It's a baited audience. It's like, people know us, there's a bunch of us going up and doing this, and it's kind of like, we're the guys that are playing the thing, and we're going to make jokes about Kiss or whatever, not about Kiss, but about the Kiss fandom that we're all part of. And we're not going to make fun of Kiss, because that would be very uncool at a Kiss convention.
That'd be wrong on so many levels.
Probably wouldn't go over very well either. Yeah.
Right. But I think it's good, Todd, and I admire you for, like, sometimes you just got to stretch yourself, and you just got to, feel the fear and push through it. And
well, there's actually been like some acting things that have presented themselves over the last little while too, that I've been way too busy for, but I might find a chance to do something this year. And again, it's like, it's not something I've really ever considered, like, making a focus or a priority. And I think that's kind of what I thought most importantly back then was, I really can't do anything unless it's a priority. Like, I really can't do anything unless I put my heart and soul into it. So I just thought at the time, I'm just not going to put my heart and soul into being an actor, no matter how many things come my way. When you look back at Johnny Depp, apparently came out to LA to be a musician, and then just fell ass backwards into Nightmare on Elm Street, and then that whole thing.
And now he's just a court star.
Exactly. Yeah.
Holy crap! I've been following that actually, and it's
clear of all that. That's a total nightmare. I'm like, oh man.
100%. Oh, hey, look who's in the house. Tad Goddard from Prism is saying, "Hey, Todd.
Oh, cool.
Hey,
Nice.
Tad. Good to see you, brother."
He's a monster player.
Oh, the entire band, the entire
The
prison
best.
band is so,
The
yeah,
best.
100%.
Love them to death.
Sandra McCrae is saying fabulous interview. Thanks, Kelly and Todd. I'm sorry I'm not going to get to all the comments because there's just tons of them. There is a comment here, though, that is prompting me to mention something. I've got some super exciting news for this local Southern Alberta viewers, and Todd and I were talking about this before the show. So Toque, along with Stage Fright, who was an amazing Def Leppard tribute, will be in Tabor, if you can believe that, on July 16th.
That's right.
And so there you go, all my local viewers. Todd's going to be in the neighborhood, so make sure you check that out. And Ken Hoist says Tabor is famous for corn. Now it will be famous for hosting Toque.
I know. I'm going to pick up some corn. I'm going to pick up some corn while I'm in Tabor.
Get me some corn. It's what you do when you're in Tabor, right?
Of course, yeah. It's a given. Yeah, it's like you come to Vegas, you go to the Strip. You come to Anaheim, you go to the Disneyland. You go to Tabor, you get corn.
You get corn, absolutely. So, yeah, Todd, what would you consider? I'm trying to word this right. What would you consider your greatest achievement to date? What are you most proud of?
You know what's really weird is it seems weird to say, but I kind of always feel like there's still something coming, and I think that's a really weird way to look at it when you've done this as long as I have. I mean, and that's not to say that I don't feel good about what I've done. Like it's really weird for me because I'm so proud of the Age of Electric, and like I said, I don't regret that we didn't keep it going. I just think it's kind of like I think back on like, you know, like I just watched Doctor Strange in the multiverse, and I thought to myself, if there's a multiverse, the Age of Electric is still together, fighting all the time, but we're very successful. Because we did a reunion run around 2017, I think, and it was really, really amazing to be able to do that. And but I'm so proud that we did that, and in so many ways, if it didn't go the way it did, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. So
everything happens for a reason. I really believe everything happens the way it's supposed to. I really, really do.
The weirdest thing with the advent of COVID, it really sort of changed so much of my perspective, because up until before that, it was all about I'm a pirate and I can't wait to get back out there on the open seas. And then you realize you're not really a pirate. It's just kind of like what you do, In reality, I'm most proud of, I mean, it's weird to say, but I'm most proud of raising children that didn't end up being criminals, and
absolutely.
And about to celebrate another anniversary with my wife next week. That kind of stuff to me is I mean, and it's, if you would have asked me that kind of stuff like even 5 years ago or even 10 years ago, I don't know.
It was a different answer.
Not that they weren't a priority, because they obviously were. It was just sort of like I had always been such a career, like oriented person, and can't wait for the next step, and like, once this is done, I'm going to go do that. And then when that's done, I'm going to go do that, And now it's sort of like I try more than ever to kind of slow it all down. And because I remember thinking after the Age of Electric broke up, we didn't really break up. We just went on a 15-year hiatus. now we're back on hiatus again. And I just sort of remember thinking, like, I wish I would have slowed down and took it all in. You know what I mean? Like the Age of Electric just went boom. And I remember thinking like, you have so many memories from those days, but at the same time, you didn't slow down and look around. And so now with Slash, and especially even in this last run we just did, and being in Paris or Rome or Norway or Tokyo or Australia or South America, I really try, and it's not easy to do because it's such a whirlwind. And like I said, sometimes you breeze through, you see the sights of the city through a bus window or through the airport.
Right.
But I really, really try to like slow it down and take it all in and remember the audiences. I'm not very good at like the guys in the band will go, or the couple guys, the conspirators would be like, yeah, you remember that hotel? That's the hotel. And I go, I don't remember the hotels. The hotel is a bed and a shower.
Right. They all look alike after a while.
And I'm like, and sometimes the gigs can look alike because it's like you're on stage and you're looking at people. But I try to, in that moment, like, we just played the Grand Ole Opry in Nashville. And that's another bucket list. We played Montreux in Switzerland a couple years ago. We played the Ryman Theater in Nashville a few years ago. We played so many great places in London. Then all those places like the Apollo Theater that I grew up on, they changed the names of these places, but they're the places that you go. That live Queen album you heard, or that live Motorhead album, that was recorded.
That's where it's from. Yeah.
And you're standing there going like, oh my God, like when you think about all the people that have played there. And then Download used to be Castle Donington Festival. And, you know, those kind of things, like you just, as a rock and roll nerd like me, it's a big deal, you know, and I try not to take it for granted. And I really have never, I'll be honest, I've never taken it for granted. There's a great line in the Kiss song, which we sing when I play with Bruce, God gave rock and roll to you. There's a great line, and I always look at Zach when we sing it, because we trade off in that song. There's a great line that says, if you want to be a singer or play guitar, man, you got to sweat because you won't get far, or you won't get far. It's never too late to work 9 to 5. And I remember just thinking like, wow, that is a deep line.
That's powerful.
It's true. It's true. You know, to be at my age now and still be doing this is kind of like, you know, and the music industry gets harder every year with trying to figure out how to do all this and like, you know, Spotify or whatever, like it's not like it used to be. That's why Aerosmith and the Rolling Stones are still on the road in their advanced age, or Kiss or Paul McCartney. When guys like Paul McCartney and the Stones, they're not too worried about the dough, but that is where the revenue comes from. And that's where, you know, it's on the road. It's in the merch. It's in all that stuff. It's not in the records anymore. You know,
I think they do it because they have to. I don't think you ever lose, you know, when it's in your blood as it is with yourself, I don't think you ever lose that need to be creative and connect with your audiences. And I don't think it changes just because you're 70.
No,
you know,
I
really don't.
Yeah, I just saw the Stones when they were here, and it was like, you know, looking at a 78-year-old Mick Jagger was the same as looking at a 48-year-old Mick Jagger.
Right.
You know, from just watching him do his thing was just kind of like, it's mind-boggling. I mean, and it's not. There's something also kind of like superhuman going on there. It's not like like my dad's about his age and he's not in a hurry to go do any of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that's not going to happen. But, you know, I think that there's something to be said about like what I do keeps us young. You know, it just sort of makes us stay in a certain frame of mind. And long as you can keep
perpetual state of immaturity.
100%. And that's
but in a good way, in a very good way.
Yeah. Like it's weird because I always say to my friends, I go, the only way it feels like time goes by is when we look at our kids. I go, damn, your kid's grown up now. I go, wow.
When did that happen, right?
Because you're exactly the same guy I've always known, but somehow it's like it all kind of adds up that way.
Right. You know, Todd, I feel like before we leave here, we couldn't leave without mentioning Toque. Because man, that is one talented group of musicians. So
I agree.
You'll be touring with Toque this summer, and do you mind just telling the viewers that may not know who these guys are that you play with, and
sure, yeah,
a little bit about the members?
Toque started as we started playing these. It's really windy here. I don't know if you can hear that, but it's like
hey, I live in Lethbridge. It's always windy.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah. But we started getting these playing at like charities. There was a charity in Winnipeg for breast cancer and stuff like that. And Brent Fitz said, what if we just play all Canadian music? Wouldn't that be cool, playing in Winnipeg? And I go, that'd be a blast, you know. Kim Mitchell and Rush and April Wine and, you know, Honeymoon Suite. I mean, the list goes on and on. And a lot of it is very specific to those of us from Canada to know, you know, to know all that music. And it started as kind of a gag. And I think Corey was originally involved, Corey Churko. So we got Corey Churko on guitar, who plays in Shania Twain's band still to this day. So she does stuff here in Vegas, and Corey's the musical director. He's been there maybe over 20 years now, playing with Shania Twain. And he's from Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. So I've known him since we were teenagers. And so we started this thing. And then the weirdest thing where Brent Fitz is the drummer, but he said, I can't remember how what decision was made, but he said, what if I played bass and we brought in Shane Gallus to play drums? And Shane had been a friend of ours from Innisfail, Alberta. He played in an AC/DC tribute back when I was playing, you know, with the club days. And we're all Canadian guys living in the US, and we all love this music. And it just turned into a thing. We literally, you know, started doing these charity gigs. Then we started tracking these songs. I remember one of the real inspirations was driving around Hollywood with Corey, and we were listening to Queen City Kids from Regina. And I was just kind of driving around. I remember looking out the window at these other cars and just thinking, like, these people, no one has heard this song,
Right.
None of these people know how amazing this song is, or
like Dance or Falling You Down
whatever we were listening to. Yeah.
Oddly enough, Kevin Finn from Queen City Kids is coming on the show in 2 weeks.
Oh, I love that guy.
It's funny that you would bring them up. Yeah, looking forward to that. So.
Yeah, so I mean, like, and that was sort of I remember just saying, like, wouldn't it be cool to record these songs so so that these people that we're driving, not everybody, but the people that follow Slash and what we do all over the planet, like Europe, Asia, Australia, South America, that we could present these songs. Queen City Kids, Street Heart, like a lot of them. It's one thing about Loverboy or the things that are sort of more already known, like New Girl Now by New Girl Now, or by Honeymoon Suite, or like Roller by April Wine. Though a lot of people know those songs. Working for the Weekend, like those songs are kind of known all over the planet. Tom Sawyer by Rush, it's like,
right.
But we just started tracking versions of these songs, and it was so rewarding to us. Harlequin, there's another band from Winnipeg that it was really rewarding for us to literally have people. I said, wouldn't it be cool if someone from Japan said, I love that song by Harlequin or the Queen City
Right.
Kids.
That would be amazing. And you guys did that.
And it literally happened. And I was like, that is so cool, And it felt like really like being ambassadors to not only Canadian music, but prairie music in a sense, like
100%.
Specifically like Street Heart, Queen City Kids, Harlequin, that kind of scene was a very big deal to us. So, and so it's really kind of grown into a whole other thing. So we made a second record in which we wrote a song, Never Enough for You, and then we wrote another song called Up to You. And we have a new one that we're hoping to kind of stick out there pretty soon too. So it's been such an interesting time, because the whole idea of making music these days is so confusing, because people are putting up one song on the internet and kind of going, I don't know. So it's like, so we've been doing the same thing of like, well, is it really worth it for us to sit down and make, 10, 12 songs and put out a record? Or is it better just to put songs out and maybe down the line, once we've kind of got enough of them, go, here's the record, Right. So, and I think that's part of the fun of it, is kind of like not really having a plan, in a sense, like just kind of like making music and going like, well, now let's get it out there. So now with Toque, it's sort of like, now it's it's become sort of very busy. It's like, not like it's not overwhelmingly busy, but in the way that like out of nowhere I sort of go, yeah, this was just some wacky thing we were doing, and now it's like,
it's a thing.
It's a thing. Yeah, and people wear the shirts and people know what it is. And we played a theater in Winnipeg last time we played in Winnipeg, and it was a big deal to be able to do like like a large room like that, where it was kind of like just this kind of fun bar band that would play benefits and charity shows. And
right.
So it's the sky's the limit. And then of all the projects that we do, everybody's still doing a million other things, but it's kind of like you make a priority for it because it's so much fun.
Right. And I have to say, Todd, your version of When I'm With You is mind-blowing.
Oh,
and I say that from my heart, mind-blowing. I posted that on my Facebook page, and the comments were like, that's better than the original. And sorry,
I don't know about that.
No offense to Freddie, but wow. Like, wow.
We're friends with Freddie. We're friends with Arnold, the guys from the original Sheriff, and we made friends with them through our version of the song. Where
right.
some people have the opposite effect. They're kind of almost mildly offended that you cover
right.
songs.
Right. Especially if you do it so well.
Well, like, and that's those guys were very kind to us. Like, wow, that was so cool. And I go, because I feel the same way. Like, some people have covered Age of Electric songs over the years, and I get like really kind of, wow, that's so cool.
It's a compliment.
It's a huge compliment. I mean,
yeah.
But yeah, no, it's been really fun, and it's really challenging, because doing all those Canadian songs, or you realize how we do Saga and songs like that. Like, those guys are like amazing musicians. We do a couple Rush songs. Those are no joke. You really have to know your shit. So especially
Rush, yeah.
It's tough. But but we're such massive fans of the music and of that scene that it's in our hearts.
Right. And I love the fact, because we're roughly the same age, and I love the fact that you are keeping that music alive, because those songs, the ones that you just mentioned, those were songs that were, the background to a generation's lives.
Totally.
And I love that you're still, doing your part to keep them out there and doing them so well.
Thank you.
As well.
I mean, we just love, I mean, we love it. I mean, regardless of living in the US, careers and music pulled us down here, but we will always be Canadian in our hearts. And all that music that we play is all the music that we came up on. Because when you lived in Canada, you never really thought about the fact that, you're listening to the radio and it's like Street Heart and the Rolling Stones and whoever, you just thought they were all rock stars to you. And then when we get to go see the Street Heart or whoever, it was a big deal, so we have the hugest amount of love for all those bands and the hugest amount of respect for all those bands.
Right. And we have so many great Canadian artists. I just, and I started in this show about a year and a half ago, whatever. I've been reminded, there's been artists that I had on the show that I did not know were Canadian.
Oh,
like
yeah.
Like Nick Gilder. Like I didn't know he was Canadian. And and it's like,
I knew
man,
that.
Did you? You were up on me, man.
He was in Sweeney Todd, so that was kind of a big deal when I was a kid. Yeah.
Sweeney Todd, Dammit.
There you go.
But yeah, no. So we just have so much to be proud of, and so I love again. I have to say the fact that you're still carrying those songs on, and I'm just gonna one more comment here. Dave Rafe from Teenage Head is here.
No way.
Yeah, Dave was on the show a couple weeks ago.
There's another amazing Canadian
super nice human. Yeah. So he's just saying, great interview. Hey guys.
Awesome.
That sort of thing. Yeah, thanks for popping in, Dave. Appreciate that.
We opened for Teenage Head back in the day, Age of Electric, a few times. I can't remember exactly where, but we definitely opened for them a number of times, and they were always so cool to us because a lot of bands you open for them, they're not cool. And Teenage Head was kind of like frightening because Frankie was so like such a figure, but amazing guys, just amazing, and they were the best.
Right. I love that band. I love that. I love that era. I love that era when you could just work on the road full time and, the 80s and 90s and whatnot. But man, it certainly seems like you found a way to stay on the road, even in the digital times that we're living in. And so,
not currently. Currently, I'm home and I'm in the studio doing a bunch of projects, and that's kind of like the main thing right now, getting ready for this thing in Nashville. So it's actually been like, look, when I was talking before about COVID and staying home, now it's kind of like when I'm home, I don't feel like this kind of like actually, I'm not going to lie. I looked at my friend Chris is playing drums for Avril Lavigne, and he was showing pictures of the show, and I go, oh, cool, man. And then my friend Tanya is playing in Whitesnake. Well, there's a few friends in Whitesnake, and they're just going out to Europe. And I go, it's kind of like more the trip to Europe than it is about, just kind of like, and every once in a while I get that kind of like pang of like, oh, I got to get back out there. But I more than ever appreciate being home and having a reason to stay home and with the Rock Vault and a bunch of recording projects that keep me here, I'm happy as a clam.
Right. And I think it's a difference, Todd, too. Like before, when you had to be home, it's much different when you're choosing to be home.
Exactly.
And you get to be home, not
exactly
as opposed to having 100%.
Totally.
So, well, man, Todd, I can't thank you for stopping by and spending the last hour and a half with us.
100% my pleasure.
And so we will see you this summer in Tabor.
Please
guys.
Come say hi.
Yeah, and so Todd's website is scrolling along the bottom of your screen there. It's www.toddkerns.com.
That's correct.
So check that out. Toddkerns.com will get you there. So kind of everything Todd Kerns, some cool merch and music. And, Todd, I'm just going to close with this. I really think that one day I'm going to be sitting home watching you pick up a Grammy or a Juno Award, and I'm going to be like, I had him on my little show, and that's going to make my heart very happy.
It's funny because, and that's a whole other conversation we could spend 2 hours on, but it's funny because a lot of my friends sort of, they, get so angry looking at the Grammys or something like that, going like, there's no rock bands on here. And I go, when I was a kid, man, loving Kiss and the Ramones and Iggy Pop, I go, those guys weren't on the Grammys. They weren't on anything. I was like, that's why I don't really sweat not winning things, because all my favorite bands, Teenage Head, bands like that, all the bands that I thought were the real deal that were out there actually doing it, they didn't give a shit about all that stuff. I mean, it's always wonderful. And trust me, they gave me a star on the street in Vancouver, their Hollywood, or their, not Hollywood. Hollywood Walk of Fame is a whole other thing. But the Vancouver's Walk of Fame is, I mean, I still to this day, it's hugely strange to me that people send photos from Vancouver going, dude, check it out. I go, that is so surreal to me. And I feel very, I don't mean to be falsely humble about it, but I do feel really unworthy of being between Michael Bublé and Sarah McLachlan and Brian Adams and Bruno Gerussi or whoever the hell else they got on it. But it's like one of those things where, you know, it's greatly appreciated to have somebody recognize you like that. But at the same time, I don't, it's not why we do it. You know, it's nice when those things come our way. So,
right.
And I think just for me, I think it's, if I ever get anything like that, it'll mostly be based on longevity from like, hey, this guy's still doing this. He's still here. You know, I used to say, one of my old quotes was always like, if you just stick around long enough, they'll eventually let you in the party. It's like you keep going up to the red velvet rope and the guy goes, you're not on the list. You just keep coming back every night, and then finally
right.
they just go,
sooner or later.
They just kind of go, just go in, you know.
Yeah, right.
And that's kind of been the basis of my career, has just been kind of like, well, I'm still here, I'm still doing it. So,
right.
You know, and I like when we were just talking about the Stones, it's like, you know, well, Mick Jagger, as Ryan Dahl from the Age of Electric said to me once, I can't remember which birthday it was. He goes, I can remember. I go, damn, can you believe we're this age? And he goes, hey, well, you're still younger than Mick Jagger. And I go, you're right. I'm still younger than Mick Jagger. Yeah. And he's still doing this.
Right.
So I sort of look at that. 78 is where I kind of think, like, if I can still do it at 78, which
you're golden.
I plan to. Yeah.
Well, that makes us happy to hear, Todd. It really does.
Yeah. Well, we'll
so
see.
We on behalf of all the viewers and all your fans, we just wish you continued success. And
thank you so much.
And yes, thank you so much for being here, Todd. Much appreciated. And once again, super huge shout out to Writers and Rockers Coffee Company for sponsoring this show. And guys, we'll see you next week with Drew Arnott from Strange and Mats. Until we see then, yeah. Stay safe and sane. Take care. Be really nice to each other, guys. Bye-bye.
Big love. Bye-bye.
Big love. Bye.